there was a report today that Bo Horvat rejected the Canucks' best offer. Now, a lot of times, Chris, I would see a report like this, and just in anything like past history, the NHL, anything like not just this situation. I would look at this situation and say,
200-word article.
Have you have you never heard of negotiating through the media? You know what I mean? Because people are like, okay, well, and sorry, I should read Dollywall's report in full. What Dollywall actually said was that the Canucks made their best offer to Bo Horvat, and it was rejected. The Canucks stretched it to as far as they could go. As of right now, I believe they have gone as far as they can go. Even the number the Canucks were willing to go to, they would have been over the cap at the end of the season. The Canucks will now take the best offer for Bo. So Dollywall kind of threw out there with his knowledge of the situation. He's going to guess. He said it was a guess that the offer the Canucks made was under $8 million. And Bo is over that with his start. This is what Dollywall is assuming. And yeah, like Dollywall went on to say, Canucks can't sign another $8 million player. Now, the thing that I find interesting about this, Chris, is yeah, like a lot of people have kind of pointed out, like people are kind of reading too much into this because yeah, Dollywall said the Canucks are now going to look for their best trade option. This looks like the beginning of the end if we're to take this report at face value. And people are saying, well, that's just a negotiation tactic. From what you hear, and just from conversations you and I have both had behind the scenes, that type of thing, this really does feel like the beginning of the end, right? Like this kind of feels like it's, I don't want to use the term nail in the coffin because I don't think Bo's going to get traded for at least another 2 months. Remember, folks, the 2023 trade deadline is on March 3rd. So you still have some time. Like, I don't think Bo's getting traded right away, even with this report coming out. I don't think that's what's gonna happen here. Like I think we're still gonna see Bo Horvat as Vancouver Canuck for a while.
I don't know about that.
You think it's soon?
It could be soon. I'm saying I don't think it's gonna happen at March. Was it March 3rd? March 4th?
No, I think it'll happen in February.
Right. It could happen in February. I also think that with the value being so high and other teams, like think about the Avalanche, a team that's been talked about a lot as a destination for Horvat. I mean, the Avalanche are sitting around the Vancouver Canucks right now for points percentage. Like they're above them, but they're a team that kind of needs to get back on track. And I mean, adding a Horvat right now, you want to deal with a team that's in need, right? And I'm not saying that the Avalanche as like a whole are in a massive need. They're going to have, some injuries come back. They're basically playing the Colorado Eagles right now when you go into Denver, but like they're in need of some players right now. And that's why I wouldn't be shocked to see it sooner rather than later. Also, if you're in the position where the Canucks are in, yeah, you want teams to be bidding. I just don't think that you have to wait until closer to the deadline. I think teams can start bidding now, and I think you want to take the best offer. And if the right offer is there, hopefully in hindsight, looking back to what happened with JT Miller and that offer that was coming in from the Rangers, you need to look and say, hey, not everything's going to work out perfect for us. Maybe we should take this deal now, right? And if it's a good enough deal that makes you happy about the return, I don't see any problem with it happening in January, at some point in December here. If the right deal's on the table, the Canucks can't push it down the road. They need to take it. They need to take the right deal for Horvat because you brought it up. He's going to get $8+ million on the open market. That's simply what it's going to be. The Canucks, they can't afford that. They like physically looking at the cap, they cannot afford another $8 million player next year and still be able to ice, 18 skaters and 2 goaltenders because even right now with the team, like they have a little bit of space right now to make a move. And actually the Avalanche do as well. So it's not like there needs to be a ton of money coming back. The Avalanche also don't have a lot of bad money. I keep bringing them up as an example because they have their first round pick this year. They have their first next year. They have some very interesting high profile prospects that are obviously kind of at the bridge of making the NHL right now. They have some really interesting pieces that can make a deal happen. But you think about it, and the Canucks, they have some cap space right now, but it's like, Tanner Pearson is on LTIR, his 3.5. You're not seeing that on the cap. You still have Tyler Myers next year at $6 million.
Pearson's getting healthy too.
Right. JT Miller's about to get a $2.75 million raise going into next season. You've got Kuzmenko, Höglander, Dermott, Bear. All of them don't have a contract for next year. So you need to still be able to ice, a lineup. I mean, there is $2.4 million coming off the books for the Virtanen and Holtby buyouts. And Ferland's LTIR is gone, which everyone's like, LTIR is great for cap. It is, but it's also like fine to just not have to deal with the LTIR stuff as well. And maybe you can use that in a different way, specifically not knowing the future of Tucker Poolman. And we asked Boudreau about Tucker Poolman yesterday, and yeah, he just said no update, like nothing. So I don't know what his future is with playing hockey. They can't afford the $8 million. So yeah, I think that it wouldn't shock me to see it sooner rather than later up to this point with a Bo Horvat trade, because now, listen, this report from Rick Dollywall is going to go around the league like wildfire, right? With reports like this, I don't know if people truly understand how fast like these big news stories go around. Like this Dollywall report is probably on every single NHL GM's plate, desk, whatever you want to call it. Like every NHL GM has probably seen this now. Because think of like I even just think back of like last week the Luke Shen article that like gets to Luke Shen's
Hankinson,
agent
yeah.
within hours, and it's like around like I don't think people truly understand how quickly these things get out to folks. And obviously when it's a big report like Rick Dollywall, who does an incredible job breaking these stories and getting these reports out there, like every GM is now aware. It's like this is sort of a good play for the Canucks now, with everybody being aware of the situation and saying like, everybody, all the GMs probably perking up and giving a call to Vancouver right now, or at least Vancouver is going to be following up on calls and making these conversations. So I don't know if it's going to be a long-term thing. I think it could be sooner rather than later for Horvat to be traded.
Yeah, and also, this is just my own little thing. I love when Dollywall puts out these reports. People in like comment sections, like especially when we pick it up at Canucks Army, people like can't listen to anything Dollywall says. When it's like you just brought it up that like every NHL GM is going to be calling the Canucks about this. And anyway, I'm not going to start on this, but I always find that really funny when that's the case. So I ask you this, Chris. The Canucks have made their best offer to Bo Horvat, and for those in the podcast, I just did some air quotes there. They've made their best offer to Bo Horvat. Probably can't go over 8 million, and I don't think you'd really want them to either, right? Like
they already made they made their bed with the JT Miller deal.
And they shouldn't have
do it again.
And they shouldn't
absolutely
shouldn't have done that with Miller. Like that's the thing. And again, I know hindsight's 2020 and all that sort of stuff, but if you're using hindsight for Miller, right, and you're saying maybe we shouldn't have given this guy what we gave him, learn the same thing from Bo, where you have a guy who's having a career year in terms of production. He's not going to sustain it. Like Bo Horvat, maybe he scores 50, maybe he scores 60 this year. Like maybe he scores that. I think it's safe to say he will never touch that total again throughout the rest of his career.
Right.
I think this is going to be the best year of Bo Horvat's career, like it was last year for JT Miller, and the Canucks jumped at it to pay him for his best year. Miller's never going to get 100 points or 99, whatever he had. He's never going to get that again. And not only that, once the offense dries up, you're looking at, remember at the start of the year when people were talking about, this guy's a defensive liability. Like he's legitimately a liability out there. Like that's what you're looking at with JT Miller long term. And again, I'm not trying to slag on Miller here. Players that put up points deserve to get paid. I understand that. But with where the Canucks are at right now, paying up for JT Miller the way they did just didn't make sense. And again, the direction I'm trying to go with this is just say, look, Bo is not a fantastic defensive player or anything like that. So, with a guy like Patrice Bergeron, I'm using him because he's the easiest example to think of. When his offense dries up, he's still bringing a lot to the table. Like he's still your first line center, even if he's not scoring or putting up a ton of points, because he plays defense so well. Bo Horvat doesn't play defense extremely well. It's always been a sense of, trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, right? With Bo Horvat. And again, we'll talk about this another time. I throw out the take to you kind of before the show about the Canucks have always just kind of seemed to have misused and not mistreated. I don't want to say that, but he's never had consistent wingers throughout his entire Canucks career. They've always tried to use him as a defensive center, and that's partly why he's never had consistent wingers throughout his career with the Canucks. And like we're seeing what Bo Horvat is now, he's a scoring center, but he's always been had to be used as a defensive center, and he was never that. And it was just because of the Canucks roster construction that he had to be used like that. Again, square peg in a round hole. And again, right. I don't want to just ramble on here, and I know that's what I'm starting to do, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. But my point is people in the chat even are saying like, trade Miller, trade Besser, give up whatever assets you have to in order to free up the cap space to sign Bo. Do that. And Commander Vander pointed out, he said, if you're just moving out guys to give Bo more money, you're just making the team worse without actually fixing any cap issues. Like if you're moving out money in order to just give it all to Bo Horvat, like you just said, you still have to ice a team around him. And hey, like the Canucks couldn't ice a good team around Bo Horvat when he was making 5.5. Now he's going to make 8 for 8 years, and we're okay with that.
And
Like,
it's not just that; it's JT Miller's money going up. It's the
exactly.
next contract for Pettersson. So you've put yourself in a situation where you've really bet on the wrong boat at this point, right? Like you bet on JT Miller. He's obviously like moved to the wing. We saw it practice on Sunday, and we'll get to the changes to the lineup in a minute here.
Yeah.
But you know, this is the guy, this is the player who would have been the center for you moving forward. And when Bo does end up leaving, which is kind of imminent at this point, it looks like it's just coming down the road. Now you kind of have to use JT Miller as a center. And is he a center? Is he at his best when he's a center? I don't think so. I think he's at his best when he's playing the wing.
If this team trades Bo, he's a center.
Again, to what you said about, round peg, square hole, whatever you said, you're going to have now have your top 6 centers be Pettersson and Miller. Because what's the other option? What is
Studnicka is your second line center.
Studnicka is going to play there. Maybe the player that you get back in the Horvat trade could play there. Like that could be something. But at the same time, that you're asking a lot for the Horvat trade if you start to like pick and select the value coming back, right? That's when you're going to hurt the overall value. If you need to have a center who can play in your top 6 coming back in the Horvat deal, you're limiting the value because you're not going to be able to get a defenseman and a draft pick and that center is going to hop into your top 6. Now you're starting to limit the value. You want to just have pure value coming back. And yes, the Canucks have like a lot of wingers that can score and put up points. Maybe that's like somewhat of what you're getting back, but then you need to sort of work other things. Like, we've talked about like it's going to take some pain for this team to get into their spot. It's almost like, to me, it's like a scab, right? Like you don't want to like pick at your scab. And that's what it felt like. Like the playoffs was the scab, and the Canucks kept picking at it instead of just like letting it heal naturally with like the money coming off the books from the players that you traded for OEL. Now the JT Miller situation, they just keep picking at the scab when you should have just like let this team like was on course to be able to set yourself up for a retool. Now you're being forced into a retool, and you never want to be forced into something when you're an NHL team and kind of managing your cap, especially in this era where money is really everything.
And look,
the salary cap.
When Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin got here, like they talked about that, right? Like they talked about how, okay, we might need to change some things up, right? And our defense isn't good enough, that type of thing. Like we heard that, right? And then something changed. And you look back at that deadline offer from the Rangers last year, and I hate to bring it up again, but Filippino's got like 5 goals, 7 assists so far on the season. Not JT Miller numbers, but he's still only 22, 23 years old. You pick him up. You pick up Niels Lundqvist, who's doing really well in Dallas right now. You also add a first-round pick to that. It's just, and again, like the Canucks looked at that and said, that's not enough, right? And reportedly, right. That's what happened. And again, you look at that situation and you say, you can't have that happen again with Bo Horvat. Like you can't have all these offers for Bo Horvat. And even if you don't think they're great, take the best one. You can't do it where you clear out money so that you can keep Bo and just learn the same thing that you've already learned here with JT Miller. You just can't do it. And again, this isn't an indictment on Bo Horvat. If the Canucks were really close to being a contender, I'm fine with that JT Miller contract. I am fine with the Bo Horvat contract. But the Canucks have no direction. They have no plan right now. And they need to set one in order to figure out who deserves this money. Because right now, you're paying for JT Miller at his best, doing what he's doing now. It's not enough to move the Canucks over the needle. You're not even paying for Bo Horvat to be on pace to be a 60-goal scorer in the league, and you still can't win games with your team in their current form. This is going to take some time. And the Canucks need to actually make moves that show that they recognize that it's going to take time. And I don't want to say I'm tired of this. Everybody is tired of this. Everybody is tired of this middle of the pack stuff. And I don't want to come out and just repeat what we've been saying for the past, I don't know how many weeks, since the start of the season when the team couldn't buy a win for the first 7 games or whatever it was. You just look at these situations and you just say, okay, like it's great that they offered something to Bo under 8 million and you assume for around 7-8 years. It's great that they offered him that and he rejected that. But what if he accepted it? Like, what if you had JT Miller on the books and you had Bo? And again, Dhaliwal said that he thinks with what they were going to offer that the Canucks would have been over the cap anyway next year. So there would have had to been some gymnastics that happened. But if this is the best the Canucks are going to do, then move on. Like figure out where you go from here. Make a plan and follow it. Like you said, sure, you're being forced into it more than you would have liked to have been, but take the hint. Like you have to at this point. You have to do something
Do some
that
healing,
shows
man. Do some healing for
exactly.
this organized for the fan base, right? Like begin the healing process anyways. That's just the way I look at it. And like I think a lot of it too can be looked at as like, hey, listen, so think about like the Rangers trade off, right? If you get a first round pick, let's say the Rangers finish or any team that you trade with, like say you end up trading a first round pick for with the Avalanche and they finish, you know, top four, they get to the semifinals, whatever, you're picking like 29th in the draft in this upcoming draft. Think of the players that could add to the Canucks prospect pool in that is huge. And we'll get to our poll question a little bit because it's interesting with that and kind of to tie back into this, but we'll get to the lineup changes. But like think of last year's draft. 28th overall, Yuri Kulik goes, a center who's looked great coming from the Czech league. 29th overall, Maverick Lamoureux, the right shot defenseman who's like 6'8" or something like that. Brad Lambert goes 30th overall. He's jumping into the AHL. Saw him play on Friday. Like these type of prospects are what really helps you moving forward down the road because we're seeing right now with the Canucks top prospects being like you need Jack Rathbone to hit, you need Klimovich to hit, you need these prospects to hit. You just need more of those type of prospects. And those are the type of ones you could be getting with these first round picks.